Thank you. I rise to speak in support of this motion. I unequivocally condemn the horrendous attack against peaceful protesters marching in Boorloo or Perth on January 26 and acknowledge the deep fear, anger and grief that this attack has caused, particularly for Indigenous people, but for Australians right across the country. For decades, protests on January 26, often referred to as Invasion Day marches, have been held every year. This year, in capital cities and regional towns alike, tens of thousands of people gathered peacefully. They gathered to recognise the suffering of Indigenous Australians, the enduring impacts of colonialisation, the trauma of stolen generations, ongoing racism, and the devastating reality of deaths in custody. In Boorloo, around 2,500 people came together peacefully. Families were there, children were there. People were marching peacefully to express their support for Indigenous Australians, exercising a fundamental democratic right and calling on the government to do better. At approximately 12:40, it is alleged that a homemade explosive device was thrown into that crowd, landing among women and children. By sheer luck, it did not detonate. This was not a hoax bomb. This explosive was reportedly packed with ball bearings and nails to deliberately inflict maximum injury and death in that peaceful crowd of families. This bomb reportedly failed only because of a faulty fuse. The thought of what could have happened is horrifying. Police confirmed that had this bomb exploded, this could have been a mass casualty event. It should not be an image that any community has to imagine, and it should stop every one of us in our tracks. Tragically, Australians now find it easier to imagine the horror of terrorism. Now, many Australians are understandably afraid that hatred was motivated, for another attack on this Invasion Day protest. Now, Australia is a nation woven from many sources. First, Australians trace their history back on this continent for 70,000 years, but most Australian families have come through this place through migration. The strength of Australia is, to paraphrase Noel Pearson, braided from ancient Indigenous history and culture, British institutions and multicultural achievement. Binding us together is a shared tolerance that accepts the rights of all to practice their faith, enjoy their culture and express their opinions in a way that accepts difference and acknowledges the reciprocal rights of others. This attack on this march was just not an attack on a protest. It was an attack on our shared values, on the right to gather peacefully without fear, hatred, racism or violence or motivated by racial hatred, on the safety of Indigenous Australians simply standing together in a public space. I welcome the fact that the Western Australian Joint Counter-Terrorism Team is now investigating this incident as a potential terrorist attack. That acknowledgement matters because it reflects the seriousness of what occurred. But acknowledgement is not enough. Differences of opinion are inevitable. For some, January 26 is a day of mourning. For others, it is a day to come together and celebrate. We must make room for both. I am a very proud Australian, but I recognise that for many Indigenous Australians, the celebration of Australia Day is a painful reminder of the impact of colonialisation on their people. For some Australians, the Invasion Day protests are an affront to their national pride, but we must accept these differences and recognise the importance of the rights of all to express their views. This is something I think all Australians can unite on. We should, and everyone should in this country, be able to gather peacefully without any threat or fear of violence. We cannot tolerate those who turn difference into extremism and violence. We must ensure that free speech does not become an excuse for speech intended to generate hate and excuse violence. We must ensure that we have effective de-radicalisation programs in place to steer vulnerable people away from radicalisation, and we must ensure that our police and security forces have the necessary tools to prevent this violence before it happens. And those protections must extend to all Australians, including absolutely fundamentally our Indigenous Australians and their allies targeted at the Invasion Day rally in Boorloo, Perth. We must act. We must stand with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians, and we must ensure that no one in this country is made to fear for their life simply for exercising their democratic rights.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. The Minister.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. On 26